I was riding the train home from campus one day during rush hour. It was more crowded than usual, and because all the seats were taken, I was standing in the middle of the train car, crammed between people. I started feeling really warm, and almost like my skin was prickling, and then I started to get very dizzy. By the time I realized I was having a panic attack, little dots had already started dancing before my eyes. I knew that I was going to faint and started pushing against the crowd to reach the door. Just as I stepped off the train, my entire vision went dark. I couldn't see anything. All of a sudden, a girl my age grabbed my arm and led me to a bench. She had been on the same train car as me and had noticed that something was wrong. She helped me sit down and talked me through deep breaths. She was a complete stranger, but she stayed with me until I felt better and could stand up again. I don't know what would have happened to me if she hadn't helped me. A few years ago, I was running myself a little ragged and unfortunately got sick on the subway. I was alone and in my early 20s, and the subway was between two stops. Not an ideal situation in any way. Someone offered me their seat, and when we finally got to the next stop, I got off the train and just sort of sat down and leaned against the wall, trying to regain my composure and feel better. A woman actually got off with me, told me she wouldn't bother me, but also let me know that she was standing nearby if I needed anything. After a while of staying with me, I started to get up when she looked at me directly and said, "Slow down." I think about this all the time, because it was clear that the way she said it, that she meant it on so many levels. Sometimes when I'm overbooked or running around the city feeling stressed, I think about it and that woman's face, and then I think about how sincere her concern was and that she cared for me, a total stranger. I've struggled with anorexia for most of my life. I even spent some time in a rehabilitation center. When I was released, I started putting more effort into grocery shopping. Having consistent, pre-planned meals was the only way for me to fight the urge against starvation. One day, I slept over at my best friend's house. When I woke up the next morning, I started to panic, realizing that I didn't have access to my own kitchen, which likely meant not eating at all that morning. She woke up shortly after me and told me that she had brought the ingredients needed for my usual breakfast, and even asked if she could go ahead and make it for us. I was stunned. Not only that she had paid attention to such a small detail in my routine, but that she had actually made the effort to act on it in order to make me feel more comfortable in her home. When I was working at a grocery store, I was navigating a panic disorder that just destroyed my body. I had to call out of work often because I was too dizzy to drive or too nauseous to leave the bathroom floor. When I had only one day left of calling out, the human resources manager went through my line after clocking out and heard about my distress. She clocked back in to help me fill out a leave of absence, which ultimately saved my job. I was able to get the help I needed and pay for it too, because my income was secured. That small gesture meant everything to me. When I was 17, I was playing a game of tackle football with a friend and a group of boys from my church. I didn't know everyone there, and there was one boy in particular that kept becoming angry whenever we scored a touchdown against them. After scoring another touchdown, he suddenly ran full speed at me, while my back was turned. He was probably twice my size. Even though plenty of people had seen what had happened, my friend was the only one who came to check on me. He helped me stand up and walked me to the nearest hospital. I was able to get a prescription on the spot. The doctor told me that my back could have been broken from the force. To this day, I don't know what would have happened if my friend hadn't helped me get to the hospital so quickly. When my daughter was in the 4th grade, I was diagnosed with depression. I started taking antidepressants and kept taking them even though they made me feel worse. I assumed they were just regular side effects. Over time, the medication numbed me. I didn't like myself anymore. My daughter, at 8 years old, came to me one day and said, "Mom, you have to stop this. I don't want to lose you." I stopped taking the medication and slowly started feeling better. Years later, I found out that I had been wrongly diagnosed and should have never been taking the medication in the first place. I essentially raised my little brother. I taught him how to swim, how to ride a bike, and how to make some mean pancakes. When I was a teenager, my depression started taking over my life. There were times I was sure I wouldn't make it past 18, so I stopped caring about school. I stopped trying in most aspects of my life, actually. There was a day when I was 17 that I had planned to end it all. I was home alone, but luckily for me, my brother's basketball game was canceled, and he came home early. He came home with flowers and a card that read, "Because you do so much for me." I started crying, and he didn't understand why. To this day, he still has no idea why I cried like that. He doesn't know that he taught me that love was all you needed to save a life. I saw a dress in a consignment shop that I knew my granddaughter would love, but money was tight, so I asked the store owner if she could hold it for me. "May I buy the dress for you?" asked another customer. "Thank you, but I can't accept such a gracious gift," I said. Then she told me why it was so important for her to help me. She'd been homeless for 3 years, she said, and had it not been for the kindness of strangers, she would not have been able to survive. "I'm no longer homeless, and my situation has improved," she said. "I promised myself that I would repay this kindness that so many had shown me before." She paid for the dress, and the only payment she would accept in return was a heartfelt hug. When my grandson Max told his mother Andrea to donate any check she would give him for his 21st birthday, Andrea got an idea. She handed Max's brother Charlie a video camera. Then she took out 21 $10 bills from the bank and bought 21 apples at the supermarket. When they spotted a homeless man, Andrea told him, "Today is my son Max's 21st birthday, and he asked me to give a gift to someone to help him celebrate." She handed the man a $10 bill and an apple. The man smiled into the camera and announced, "Happy birthday, Max." Soon, they passed out their booty to men and women waiting in line in the soup kitchen. In a unified chorus, they wished Max happy birthday. At a pizza parlor, Andrea left $50 and told the owners to feed the hungry. "Happy birthday, Max," they shouted. With one last $10 bill and an apple, they stopped at Andrea's sister's office. Unable to contain her laughter or her tears, she bellowed into the camera, "Happy birthday, Max." A year ago, Mika Harold had a heart attack and actually died several times before he recovered. Now, a year later, the coronavirus is here. Mika owns a tattoo parlor. He's an extremely talented artist, and his tattoo parlor has been closed because it is, quote, non-essential. But Mika has stepped up and is giving back to the community. His shop is on the edge of a not-so-affluent part of town. He has stocked his shop with essentials such as toilet paper, paper towels, different types of non-perishable foods, and emergency items. Some things he bought with his own money, and he has had some donations from the community. He also makes hand sanitizer, and also has gloves and other items that people need for the pandemic available in his shop. Everything is free. You just go in, tell him what you need, and he gives it to you. His mother, Deborah, is also involved. Not in his business, but in making cloth masks for people. She has long been a clothing designer, and now she is making masks and giving them away. They are both helping the community in a great deal. My husband's job is one of the essential jobs, sanitation engineer. Not a glamorous one, but consider the alternative. About the second week of the lockdown, he was having trouble finding a sanitizing spray for his truck. One morning, on his way to work at about 4 a.m., he stopped at one of the few stores open that early, hoping to purchase some. When he got to the door, he saw that it was only open for the first responders and medical personnel. As he turned to head back to his car, a local sheriff's deputy heading into the store spotted my husband's reflective vest and asked him which trash company he worked for, then proceeded to thank my husband for being out there. My husband replied that it was only the deputy that deserved thanks. The deputy asked if my husband always shopped this early, and my husband told him about his trouble finding a spray. When asked if he had found it that morning, my husband told him that he couldn't go into the store. The deputy then told my husband to stay where he was. He went into the store, purchased the spray, and brought it out to my husband. When my husband tried to pay him, he wouldn't take the money. Going to the post office is usually a weekly event for me. I rarely give it any thought other than to drive there, go inside, and drop off my letter or package. However, our world has changed now, and I must give careful consideration to this journey, as my age and pre-existing condition put me into the quote-unquote vulnerable category. There are decisions that I need to make. Is this a package that must go out now? Well, I conclude that it is. Is there anyone else who can take the package for me? I conclude that there is not. So, I have made 2 decisions already. Next, I must determine which of the 2 post offices closest to me would be the easiest one to accomplish this goal. I realize the larger one would be my best choice, and that's the 3rd decision made. On the drive over, I determine that I will look to see the number of cars in the parking lot before I make my decision to go in. Upon arriving, I conclude that the car population is small enough, so I pull into an empty space. My next thought is, perhaps I should wait for someone to come out and ask them to take my package in? Then I realize I will be making contact with a perfect stranger, and what is the difference between talking to a stranger and just going in and talking to the clerk? Next decision made, I walk inside. There are only 2 people, and both are standing at the counters making their transactions. I walk to the front of what is normally a very long line, and I'm standing alone, waiting my turn. Shortly, I'm called to the window. I can see that the postal clerk is aware of the fear in my eyes. She quietly steps back from her station and motions me to come forward. I step up to the counter and place my package on the scale. She then motions me to step back. I move away and she begins the process of weighing it and determining the proper postage. She tells me the price and motions me forward as she takes a step back. Again, I believe she saw the terror in my eyes and said, "One moment, ma'am." She leans under the counter and picks up a Lysol wipe. She thoroughly cleans the credit card machine and the entire counter around it. She then steps back and again motions me forward. As I insert my card, tears start to roll down my cheeks. I was so moved by the care with which she accomplished that usual very simple task. When I had completed the transaction, she again motioned me back and she stepped forward. She took the receipt, wiped it down, and laid it on the counter. Beside it, she placed a clean tissue as she could see my tears were still streaming down my cheeks. She again stepped away from the counter. I picked up the receipt and took a step back. In gratitude, I bowed to her. She bowed to me with equal respect. One time I had an ovarian cyst and had to go to the hospital. I had no one to watch my 1-year-old son, so I had to bring him with me. I was crying really hard because I couldn't get my son to sit still with me, and he kept trying to pull on my tubes. I just broke down. My phone was dead, so I couldn't call anyone. One of the nurses came up to me in my room and asked me if it was alright if she tried to calm my son down and give me a break. She brought some toys and a blanket back for him, and she held him in her arms and played with him so that I could calm down until my mother-in-law showed up. I didn't even get the nurse's name, but it was so meaningful that she would show enough compassion to help us. To me, angels are real. I was 40 miles from home in a high-crime area for a work obligation, and I had driven with my empty gas tank light on for the entire trip there. I only had $1.67 on my debit card, and as I asked the clerk at the sketchy gas station I stopped at to put $1 on my pump, a man walked in. My card was declined, so I sat in my car trying to find any change or singles I might have stashed. The man came up to my car and told me he put $5 on my pump. I don't know if the man has any idea how much he helped me, but it got me home safe even though I cried tears of appreciation for most of my drive. I had just moved to a new country with my husband and 6-month-old baby. I had nothing to do and knew no one. So I went for a walk with the baby in the stroller and was about 3 miles from our apartment when the stroller tire got a puncture and went flat. I knew my son was going to start crying if we took too long, and I was getting anxious about embarrassing myself in a foreign country. A very nice man was riding his bike and hopped off. He said that he had a tire repair kit and patched up my tire. He also inflated it and even topped off the tires themselves. It only took him about 5 minutes and he just hopped back on his bike and left, but it saved me so much time and stress, and I'm still so grateful. I was grocery shopping when I received a call that my grandpa had died. My grandpa and I were very close my whole life. Everybody called me his little shadow. We knew it was coming, but to hear it over the phone put me into a shock. I just stood there and went white and numb. An older couple happened to be standing near me and sensed something was wrong. They asked, but I couldn't make words come out. They sat with me for a while, got a hold of my best friend to come pick me up, and bought the groceries in my cart. Then, not too long after, they sent flowers to my house. Apparently, they had my friend's phone number from when they called her, and they paid her to send a bouquet to me. That was one of the worst days of my life, and I miss my grandpa every single day. But that kindness and humanity makes me cry in a good way. We went to have all-you-can-eat steamed crabs at a local seafood joint here in Maryland. It was a nice break from our grandchildren that we raise. A friendly gent next to us asked my husband if he was in the Marines. He was wearing a t-shirt with USMC, and he said that he was. They chatted on and off, and I enjoyed my steamed crab. He and his family got up and thanked my hubby for his service. After they left, the waitress came over and said that the man had paid in full for our meal. I will forever remain grateful and humbled by this experience. We have paid uniformed military tabs a time or two, paid for the car behind us in toll booths or a fast food joint, but have never had this happen to us. It's an amazing feeling. We should all do things like this when we can. I took my then 3-year-old to Florida to see my grandma. While waiting to board the plane, my son fell asleep. I had him in my arms, his stroller, my diaper bag, and our carry-on luggage. Out of nowhere, a little old lady came up to me and said, "My darling, there you are. Let Bubby help you with the baby." There I was with my blue hair, tattoos and piercings, and a sleeping child, and this Jewish grandma came to save the day. I hugged her and thanked her, and handed her my sleeping son so we could board together. When we finally got to my seat, she asked the man next to me if she could sit next to us, and he very quickly gave up the seat. I looked at her and said, "This was Beshert," which means meant to be in Yiddish. She smiled and said, "Yes, it was." And there we sat on our flight to the motherland, Florida. 2 very different Jewish mothers and a little boy who slept through the whole thing. I'd love to find my mystery Bubby and thank her again, but I'm sure she already knows. I moved to California last month completely on my own. 2 weeks after I got here, I was in a huge car accident. Not only had I just arrived, but I had absolutely no one to call in an emergency. Going through such major trauma with no one by your side was the worst feeling in the world. However, that day a ton of strangers banded together to make sure I didn't feel alone. The paramedics and firefighters not only saved me at the scene, but ended up falling in love with my dog who was in the accident with me. So they brought him back to the fire station and kept him while I was recovering in the hospital. And my nurses were out of this world. When they heard I didn't have anyone to come get me, and no way to get home, and had pretty much lost everything in the crash, they banded together and raised hundreds of dollars of their own money to pay for me to get home and have something in my pocket to start rebuilding. They were my literal angels, and I don't even have the words to express adequate thanks. I'm now dating one of the paramedics who saved my life and took care of my dog, so maybe everything happens for a reason. My house had caught on fire from the backyard, resulting in the whole house being up in flames. I had been running outside barefoot panicking, and had an asthma attack from the smoke in the air while people filmed me and my home. A woman living on the same street quickly opened her home to me and my 3 younger siblings, lending me a pair of shoes when we found out a firefighter had rescued one of our cats so I could take her to the vet. I am still so shocked and thankful for her kindness and generosity to people who were sobbing on the street, knowing nothing about us, giving my family a safe space in a moment of despair. I was in grad school and 70 miles from home when my car blew a gasket in a snowstorm. On a Sunday. No mechanic shops open, and no one would tow my car back to a place until the snowstorm had lifted because of the dangerous roads. I was crying in a coffee shop on the phone, and a woman approached me and offered me a place to stay for the night. She didn't know me at all, but she took me back to her house, where I ate dinner with her, her mom, and her kids, and slept in borrowed pajamas in her office. The next day, she drove me back to my car, and I got towed home. I will never forget what extreme kindness it must have taken to bring a stranger into your home with your kids like that.